Um, and people kind of have dismissed that. You'll have come across this. Oh, no, they'd never do that. No, you would never do that because you have the ability to empathize. You have the ability to take an understanding of the feelings and the suffering that your actions are making other people suffer. Once you are of if you like, a genetic type and of a consciousness, this demonic consciousness, you have none of those fail-safe mechanisms of behavior. Not only do you not have empathy with the suffering you cause, you love it because you feed off it. And so these people are not seeing the world the way we see it. Look at bankers and the way they make people suffer all over the world by their manipulation of finance. They feed off that, and there's a word for it. Ask anybody, go to the dictionary, look up this word, or go on the internet and look for a definition of this word, and you will find that the definition of it is exactly the personality type that I have just described, the word psychopath. Why do we have psychopaths running the world in all these areas, all these institutions that dictate society? Why are we having, Alex, more and more psychopaths systematically recruited into law enforcement to impose the will of the political, corporate, banking psychopaths upon the people? Because the psychopathic mentality is the mentality of these archontic demonic entities, and it's just been transferred through, for the reasons I talk about, into our reality through these particular bloodlines, which don't just operate in the elite, they operate within human society as well. Now, you've mentioned pedophilia, because all these dots connect. All these dots connect because if they didn't, then it couldn't be true, because everything connects in the end. What these entities want to feed off almost more than anything else is the energy of children before puberty. We see the point of puberty as a hormonal change. Yes, within the hologram, where people see the body in terms of its physical functions and hormone functions, it is a hormonal change. But the hormonal change is merely a holographic expression of an energetic change in the base field. And thus, what they want is the energy of children before that puberty energetic change happens.
And let me briefly stop you for a moment. Whether or not this is demonic, spiritual, or whatever, for anybody out there, it's a fact that every civilization ends up falling to secret society cults that demand burning or chopping or eating or cutting the hearts out of children. Every culture ends up being run by people that build temples, generally pyramids, and then want to do this to children, whether it was in Europe, whether it was in the Middle East, whether it was in Africa, whether it was in Mesoamerica. Every culture ends up going to human sacrifice, and the children are what are coveted. So what is that? What is happening? I mean, you can't deny that. I mean, normal people would never even think of such a thing. And I have that question A. And then B, David, I'm a very loving person. I have intense empathy. But when someone messes with my family or someone, when I think about these elites, then I have fiery rage and, you know, the propulsion to strangle them. Now, I understand that negative, violent energy is bad, and you know, that's what the dark side's into. But what would you call the energy on the other side to stand up and crush these people?
Well, you know, there's this ancient theme throughout history of cultures sacrificing young virgins to the gods. Well, the gods are these entities, and young virgins is just code for children, for the very reasons I'm talking about. And the reason, Alex, that there is such a massively greater ratio, I mean, there are so many in the general population, it's staggering, but the reason there's a far greater ratio of pedophiles in the upper echelons, did I say upper echelons of society, is because of they are possessed people, possessed entities, possess biological computers. And while the sexual act is going on with the child, these entities are drawing off through the conduit, if you like, of the pedophile, the child's energy. And it's not just in the modern world that you see this and come across this.
They're vampires.
You look, they're vampires. They're energetic vampires. Now, that's an interesting point for this reason. What do Satanists do? They feed off blood. They drink blood. Blood is vital to them. What does blood carry? It carries the genetic code for a start, but also the blood is a expression of the energy that I'm talking about.
They like to terrorize a child first, then slit their wrist and basically bleed them out over several hours to get the maximum torture. Psychopaths talk about using somebody up, and that horrifying them gives them an energy. I mean, undoubtedly, this is going on.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at what we call acupuncture, people say, oh, they put needles in the toe to cure a headache. It's nonsense. Yeah, well, no, actually, you're just ignorant, mate. What acupuncture is doing is, through the needles and other processes, it's balancing the energy flows through what are called meridians. Now, these can be identified. These can be shown to exist. They are lines of energy going all around the body. And because they go in circuits, if you've got a block in the circuit that's in your foot, that's where the block is, it can affect the head where that circuit also goes through. And so to take the block out of the foot or the toe or wherever can remove the effect, which is the headache. Now, what these meridian lines of energy are, what the Chinese called energy qi, they are the energetic expression of the blood system, of the arteries within the hologram. And so what the Satanists in our reality are doing are drinking the energy of that person via the conduit of blood, while the entities beyond human sight, some of them within these more extreme satanic rituals, actually within sight of the Satanists in the ritual. I've talked to endless Satanists who've described this manifestation of these entities in some of these really powerful rituals. They are feeding off the energy of the person directly in an energetic form, because they're taking the energy on another frequency beyond human sight, and that's what they're feeding off. And so when you have a war, when you have what this ISIS organization is doing, when you have suffering of any kind in the way that we see in this bloodletting, what is a war? It's a bloodletting frenzy. And what these entities are doing with that energy is feeding off it. If we had a world of harmony, of love, of balance, these entities would not be able to exist here, because their energy source will...
Well, I've talked to a lot of veterans and a lot of from World War II on, and they say, they won't talk about it, but they say during mass death, the weirdest stuff goes on. Yeah. And I would imagine that's because the energy is so much stronger in those areas. And would it be if we could see like a bunch of vultures converging more of these entities in those areas?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's so much art. There's so much. I mean, I'm not into what my father used to call bricks and mortar religion, and I'm not. I wouldn't give what the way I see the world a name. But there is so much in religious texts, which are ancient texts that are recalling and recording things that went on a long time ago, which are actually telling the very story that I'm telling here. But they don't. People don't see that connection. Once you read the stories from the point of view of what's happening now, it all starts to make sense. The reason these people don't act like what we would call humans, these bloodlines, these networks of evil, is because they're not like us. They don't see the world like us. If we could just see the world through their eyes for 5 minutes, the whole world and everything that happens in it would suddenly fall into place. We'd go, oh, I see it now. That's why this is going on. And so it's, you know, the idea that within this narrow band, this ridiculously narrow band of frequency scientists call visible light, that we can know everything, whether it's mainstream or alternative or whatever, is a form of extreme ignorance as well as a form of extreme arrogance. Thus, whatever we know is what we know now or think we do. There's always, always vastly more to know. And if the alternative media comes to a certain list of conclusions and stops and won't go any further, then they're not going to get to that point where we go beyond the movie screen that we see to the projector that's projecting the movie.
Well, David, here's what I know. What the globalist is doing, well, what we can prove is so over the top, and I want to keep you a little bit longer if you can do it to finish up and talk about what you got coming up next, that the sky is already the limit. And I want to talk about, I want to discuss with you some of those things we know are going on that are crazy, and then ask you where you think it's all going. David Icke, DavidIcke.com. And he puts off a really good vibe. I think David Icke means what he's saying. I think he is very eccentric, and I mean that in a good way. And I think in my gut, I know, it's very healthy to just completely go a trillion miles out from this, to look at it from way far back and then come back and look at it real close. Because I look at this world, and let me tell you, folks, we're not in Kansas anymore. And I can't get the public to just admit what's real. I mean, what's admitted in the five senses. And then I just pick up well, I see the trail of destruction behind the globalists, but then I pick up on the way they act, the way they behave. And I've been around a lot of their minions, and it's like their minions aren't even really alive until they're doing something bad, and then they kind of activate and manifest. And I bet it's even wilder than what David Icke's saying. I mean, my gut more and more, and it's never been wrong, just tells me that we're in the middle of something so fantastic. He'll be with us to 20 after. This is a short segment. David, how is the fight going against the psychopaths and their group consciousness, if you look at it from an atheist perspective or, you know, from any other perspective, regardless, this is going on. How is the fight going for human consciousness? Because they're really pouring it on right now to suppress people awakening. And I think this was what you said 15 years ago is true. I see this year and next year, the next few years, as a critical time.
Yeah, it is. Because in the end, it's a choice. People say, how will it turn out? Well, it depends on the choices that are being made. What you will see now, Alex, is something I've been talking about for a long time, and what we now see. I mean, I was reading an article today which was basically asking the question, what the heck is happening to the human race? Some of these extraordinary things going on with people biting people's faces off and stuff like that it was talking about. Well, going back to what I've been talking about here, the awakening is the awakening to harmony. It's the awakening to balance. And the more you awaken to that, the more you open your mind and expand your mind, the more you start to see the world in a greater and greater way in terms of seeing what's really happening, as opposed to what is supposed to be happening and we're told is happening. People start to see things. And what do they say? They say, why didn't I see it before? It's so obvious. Because your mind was closed before, and thus when it was closed, it was picking up a certain band of perception. And now you are expanding your mind and literally opening your mind to a greater possibility. Now you're picking up a much wider frequency of insight, of possibility. Thus, you're seeing things differently. But on the other side, what we're seeing is people that are getting pulled more and more into this inversion, becoming more and more an expression of that inversion. So we're seeing, I would, if you people read my books from 10, 15 years ago or 15 years ago. They'll say I was talking about the fork in the road, the parting of the ways. And we're seeing it. Those